Welcome. Yarra City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners and true sovereigns of the land now known as Yarra. We also acknowledge the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to all the life in Yarra. We pay our respects to elders from all nations and to their elders past, present, and future. Thanks for coming along. I'm Mel Miller-Yule and I'm a Sustainability Officer at Yarra City Council. Tonight, we're going to learn how to compare Greenpower electricity offers, and make the switch to renewable energy, how to buy Greenpower in just over an hour. First, I'll run through a bit of housekeeping. Tonight's session is being recorded and your microphone is on mute. We'll have two Q&A sessions, one in the middle and one at the end of the session. But please feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A function at any time and we'll read them out to be answered by the presenters. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can tonight, but we may not get through all of them. We may also respond directly to your question in writing in the Q&A section, which helps us to get through more questions. You can also use the chat function. You'll see that's a separate function, and you can use the chat for any technical issues. Now I'll tell you a little bit about 100% renewable Yarra. Yarra is going 100% renewable. By coming along to the session tonight, you're taking the first step, or possibly your next step, in joining with others in the Yarra community to create a city powered by 100% renewable energy by 2030. So there are four main ways that you can take action. Number one is switch to 100% renewable electricity. Tonight, we're going to demystify the options. Whether you live in a house or in an apartment, whether you rent or own your place, switching to 100% green power is something we all can do to play our part in our climate emergency response. Number two is go solar. With government rebates and no interest loans available and discounted prices for quality solar systems available through the Yarra Solar Program, you might be eligible to get solar at no upfront cost. We're holding another webinar next Thursday to talk about solar. And at the end of this session, we'll share the link to book in for that. Number three is create an all-electric home. And you can find out more about how to go all-electric by watching our recorded webinars on getting off gas and switching to an all-electric home. And we'll share that link also at the end of the webinar. Number four is use less energy. Whether it's draft proofing, insulation, turning down the thermostat, it all helps. You can read tips on how to save energy at home on our 100% Renewable Yarra webpage, or by watching a recorded webinar with tonight's speaker, Damien Moyes, via the links we'll share after the session. Going 100% renewable is part of Yarra's climate emergency plan. We've committed to achieving zero net emissions across the entire Yarra community by 2030. And Council is walking the talk in our own operations. Since last year, all of Council's electricity needs are met by 100% renewable electricity through the Melbourne Renewable Energy Project. We joined with 14 other partners, including other councils and universities, to enter into a long-term power purchase agreement that drove the construction of a new wind farm near Ararat. I have a cat visiting me. We also have 2,920 solar panels installed on 38 council buildings and 6 Tesla 2 batteries installed in community facilities, including leisure centers, libraries, and sports pavilions. So tonight we're talking about switching to green power. Switching to 100% green power is one of the simplest changes you can make to play your part in the climate emergency response. And once you've switched, it's something you don't have to think about day to day. When you switch to 100% green power, your energy company must buy the equivalent amount of renewable energy through accredited renewable energy sources, like solar and wind farms. By buying green power, you're helping to drive up demand for renewable energy. Tonight, we'll hear about how to compare green power offers using an energy offer comparison site that we've selected because it's free to use. It gives a transparent, fair comparison, and it's easy to compare 100% green power offers. But you don't have to use this particular comparison site at home. You can use what you learned tonight to compare offers on a different site if that works for you. If you've brought your bills along tonight, you can follow along as our presenters walk you through the comparison sites tonight, or you can watch the presentation and use your bills to go through and find the best offer for you afterward. We'll talk about comparing offers and how to switch energy companies. It's easy to switch energy companies, but you don't have to switch to a particular energy retailer. And in fact, you don't have to switch retailers at all. You can also switch to your energy company's 100% green power offer. And now I'll introduce tonight's speakers, Damien Moyes and Dean Lombard of Renew. Renew, which was formerly known as the Alternative Technology Association, is a national not-for-profit organization that inspires, enables, and advocates for people to live sustainably in their homes and communities. And since 1980, Renew has provided expert independent advice on sustainable solutions for the home. Damien Moyes is Renew's Policy and Research Manager. Among other areas, Damien works extensively in renewable energy and energy efficiency. And we'll also hear tonight from Dean Lombard, who's Senior Energy Analyst at Renew. Dean has a focus on making the energy system work better for consumers while also reducing its environmental impact. And he's passionate about ensuring that no one is left behind as we transition to a clean energy future. And with that, I'll hand over to Damien and Dean.
Thanks for that, Mel. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Damien Moyes. I'm with Renew, and I think my colleague Dean Lombard is there as well. So yeah, essentially we're going to talk to you tonight in a few different, about 3 different parts. I'm going to talk through a little bit about understanding electricity bills first, and some of that stuff will be relevant in the context of choosing green power. I'm going to talk about green power offers and what green power is in the middle part of the session, and then actually introduce some tariff comparison websites and actually take you through a practical example towards the end of the session. If you haven't heard of our organisation before, we're Renew. We're a national not-for-profit organisation. We have about 11,000 members around the country, and we help people make decisions and understand technology and the complexity, I guess, around sustainable energy. And yeah, we're here tonight to help, again, with, I guess, from an education point of view, people work through how to buy green power and how to understand their bills and do all those kind of things. We're certainly not here to kind of sell you any particular piece of technology, but we're largely here to help householders and other consumers make good decisions about sustainable tech. And with that, I might hand over to my colleague, Dean Lombard, to just do the first little session on understanding your bills.
Thanks, Damien, and I'm off mute now, so you can actually hear me. So it's going to give a quick rundown on how to understand your electricity bill, because they can be a bit confusing. All that information, that's the front page of the bill. There's a lot there. I'm just going to walk through the main features on the front and the back page so that you can understand your usage and what your sort of energy offer that you're on is about. So if you look a bit more closely at the front page, that section in the middle there has all the information about your account type and the money that you owe in your bill, etc. If you zoom into sort of the top section, it's got the next slide. It's got that's where you'll find your customer account number. It's got your address. It's got the date that the bill is issued, so you know when it applies to. If you zoom over to the right-hand corner, that's where you'll find the information about who your energy retailer is, the phone number to contact them. That's the next slide. Yep. It's also got the emergency and faults phone numbers, which is for your energy network. They're the people who own the poles and wires in the street. They're a different company to your energy retailer, but that's all the information you need to know to get in touch with them if you need to. Down below that on the next slide is basically the summary of this bill. This is how much you owe. This is the date that it's due. And if there's a different amount according to if you pay it before or after the due date, that will be shown there as well, as that shows. And then down in the main body of that center part on the next slide is basically the summary of what your last bill was, how much you paid, if you've got any credit, the amount of any discounts that you've had. So that's basically all the financial information that you need to know. If you want to know more about your usage, and this is the more helpful stuff for when you're trying to work out how to use less energy and understand how your payments are based on, that's on the back of the bill. So if you flip over, there's a whole lot of information, and I'm going to go through this a bit at a time. We're going to start with that top section where it's got all the rows and columns. There's a few really important bits of information here. The one I've circled there on the top left is called the National Metering Identifier, the NIMI. It's pronounced NIMI, that's what it's called. It's not really useful for most things. You don't really need to know it, but occasionally you do need to know it. And if some of the energy offer comparison websites that we're going to talk about a bit later, you might need to know your NIMI in order to get your energy data to put into those. So that's why I'm pointing it out here. If you set up an account with your energy network to learn more about your usage, you'll also need your NIMI to set up that account because it's your unique identifier for your meter. So that's why I'm pointing that out. There's also a meter serial number that, again, you might need sometimes if you're in a conversation with one of your energy companies about a problem. So I'm pointing these out just so that you know that they're there. If you need to find them, most times you don't really need to find them. The more interesting information here, the more useful information is the billing period, which I've got circled there on the top right. That's the period of time for which this bill applies to. So the bill shows energy usage in that time. And then also down in the middle there is the number of billing days. That's the number of days that this bill is for. That's useful information. Sometimes if you're trying to look at your usage and figure out how much should I use and overall, and why is this one more than the other one, etc. If you look down a bit lower, I've got it circled now. This is all the information about how much you're actually being charged and how much you're used. This can be a bit hard to understand, so I'm trying to sort of just simplify it a bit to show that, you know, on the left you've got, they're all the things that you're billed for, and then in the middle it's got a column that says how much of each of those things you used, whether it's units of energy or days of billing period, because you get charged a fee each day for having electricity as well as an amount for what you use. And then further to the right, there's how much each of those costs, how much they're charging you for electricity per unit, how much they charge you per day to be connected. And then at the far right, there's the total cost. And that column at the far right adds up to give you your total bill. And if you look on the next slide, you can also see, if you look at the lines on the left-hand side, it shows peak consumption, off-peak consumption. I'll talk about them in a second. The supplier charge, which is the daily one. And then the one I've highlighted, this customer has solar panels. So they also have the solar feed-in tariff, which is how much they get paid for sending their extra solar energy that they don't use back into the grid. And that's why if you look at the usage column, it's actually a negative amount because it's considered a credit against what they pay. So that's useful to know. If you've got solar panels, you should have a feed-in tariff amount there as well. It might be called something different. Every retailer uses different names. And this one also has down the bottom, I mean, this is actually a Queensland bill. It has the Queensland government electricity rebate listed there. In Victoria, if you've got an energy concession, that should be listed there as well. And it will show you, again, it'll be a credit, how much credit you get back for the energy concession. And on the next slide, basically, the way to understand that table is all those units of usage times the rate that you get charged equals the total amount. I'm going to talk very quickly about tariffs. Tariff is a name for what you get charged for energy, and it's basically a few different components that all get added together in the end. And I already mentioned you have like the rate for using energy and the rate for the daily rate just for having an electricity bill. The way that you get charged for the usage of energy can vary a bit. Most people are on what we call a flat tariff. This is where no matter what time of day it is, you get charged the same amount for a unit of energy. Use 1 kilowatt hour. A kilowatt hour is the units we measure electricity in. Use 1, you get charged whatever that costs. Use 10, you get charged 10 times that. That's the most common tariff that we have at the moment. They're easy to work out cost because you just go units times cost, and that's it. But some people are on time of use tariffs, and these are actually probably going to become more common in the next few years. So I thought it'd be good just to quickly cover how a time of use tariff works. Time of use tariff has usually 2, sometimes 3 different time periods of a day that have different amounts charged for the electricity usage for each time. And this example here is just a really simple example. For most of the time, you pay an off-peak charge, which is relatively lower cost. But for some of the time, usually the middle of the afternoon towards the early evening, you pay a peak rate, which is a higher amount for the same units usage of electricity. And like I said, these are becoming more common. So it's good to understand that these the way these sort of tariffs works, and also just to think about, if you're on one of those tariffs, to think a bit more about, when do I use electricity? How does it balance out over the day? If you're home during the day a lot, usually it works out pretty well on one of these time of use tariffs, because you use a lot of energy at the off-peak rate. If you're out a lot during the day and mostly home in the evenings, that's when you might pay a bit more on those peak charges. So further down the back of the bill, there's two more bits I wanted to go over, and they're the first one down below the one of all the amounts that you pay and the amount that you used is a little graph that shows you for the last year your electricity usage and your greenhouse gas emissions. I think this is really useful, especially the usage, because it actually shows you how you use different amounts of electricity at different times of year. For example, in summer you might use more because of air conditioning, or in winter you might use more because of heating, if you're using electric heating such as a reverse cycle air conditioner for heating. And then in middle seasons often you use a bit less. There can be other things that vary the amount that you use, but it's good to get a picture of your own usage over the year so that you understand, and then you can start to predict, oh, it's spring, my bill will be a bit lower, or it's winter, I'm expecting a higher bill. The graph also shows greenhouse gas emissions from your electricity usage. This is sort of useful to know if that's something that you're concerned about, as I am. It pretty much scales with your electricity usage. The greenhouse gas emissions reflect the sort of average greenhouse intensity of the Victorian grid. If you use Greenpower, that will change, and it should reflect that. If you're buying Greenpower, it should reflect that that you lower or no greenhouse emissions, depending how many how much Greenpower you buy, as we'll discuss in a second. This also shows you your average daily usage on the top right there with the red circle around it. That's useful to know, I think, if you're trying to work out how much different energy tariffs might cost you, and just to compare different ones. And then down the bottom under that, the last bit I think is useful is how you compare with typical households. Take it with a bit of a grain of salt. There's sort of no such thing as a typical household, but it's a good little benchmark indication of, what's my energy usage and what is some sort of average usage, but with a number of people the same number of people in my house, that's considered the average. It can vary a lot depending on your type of appliances. But I certainly find it a good, useful guide just to think, does it look like I'm using a lot or not that much? So that's the quick rundown on the bills. I'm going to hand over to Damien now to talk about Greenpower.
Okay, thanks for that, Dean. And I think, we are going to talk about, just spend a little bit of time on Greenpower. Just before we do that, I wonder, Mel, whether or not we have any questions on that section about bills that we want to tackle just at the moment.
No questions have come through yet. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A and we can ask them to our presenters, maybe after the next section. Okay, great. So Greenpower. Greenpower is great, is the first point to make. We love it. And yeah, we're very keen to talk to people about what it is and why you should be taking it up, really. Greenpower is a scheme that's been around actually a very long time. It's been around for basically 20 years. It was started in about 1999, 2000. It's had a long history, and it's had quite a successful history, really. It's probably one of the longest term climate change related policies that we've got. And so we thoroughly recommend it. What is it? Well, what Greenpower is, first of all, it's an accredited independent scheme. So it's not just something that's kind of run by any individual retailer or any other kind of business in the energy market. It's actually a government regulated scheme. It's audited every year. And so you can have quite a high degree of confidence in the scheme itself. That's probably the first point to make. And how does it work? Basically, when you buy Greenpower, you normally buy it through your electricity retailer. You can buy it actually in other ways, but most people buy it through their retailer. And when you do, your retailer is then going and buying additional renewable energy to match some portion of your overall usage on your behalf. Now, you get to choose what that proportion is, what that percentage is, if you like. So you can choose to buy what's called 100% Greenpower, and what that means is that your retailer on your behalf will go and purchase additional renewable energy from the renewable energy market,
and that amount will equal 100% the total amount of your electricity usage over, generally over a billing period. So it might be over 3 months. You can do that. And then, if you do that, you're sort of for electricity usage, then you're 100% offset, if you like. You don't have to buy 100%. You can buy it in increments that are less than that. So you can buy 50% Greenpower, which means that they'll buy half your usage of electricity, or you can buy 10%. You can, and kind of really buy anything in between. You can ask your retailer about the level you want to buy. Greenpower prices have kind of come back down a bit again, and most people tend to be buying sort of 50 to 100%. And it's a really easy, clean, accredited way that you can buy renewable energy. Generally it comes from generally wind farms and large solar farms. It's a way that you can buy that energy through your retailer, through the market, without having to have, solar panels or a little wind turbine on your roof. And obviously, for lots of people, having solar panels on your roof at home is not a particularly easy thing to do, or you don't necessarily have the control to be able to do that. So yeah, Greenpower is a great scheme on that basis. So I might just pause there for a second just to check in again whether there's any questions on that bit. And if there's not, then we might get into the tariff comparison sites.
Thanks, Damien. No questions at this point. So let's move on to the next section, and we'll see if any questions come through on the next section.
Okay, great. So we wanted to, I suppose, work through and talk to you about what we call tariff comparison websites, and particularly in the context of Greenpower. So, how do you compare tariffs in general, but how do you particularly compare Greenpower offers? We get rung up all the time. People ask us, what's the best tariff or what's the best retail offer in the market? And the reality is, in the Victorian market, I think there's something in the order of 30 to 40 different electricity and gas retailers, and they all have many, many tariff offers that they put out. So at any one time, there can be thousands of offers in the market. So it's not something that, deciding what is the best tariff offer for you is not something that you can just really sort of ask somebody or somebody has in their head. You really have to go to a tariff comparison website. These are websites where hopefully all, if not all, most of the retail offers that are available to you are in the comparator website. You can go in there and you can find out then in a bit of detail, which ones are actually best for me. Now, there's a lot of these around. A lot of them are put out by private companies, commercial businesses that work in the energy market. There's a few around that are put out by governments, and many of them have been around for many, many years. So we wanted to talk about two main ones tonight, which the first one's called Victorian Energy Compare, and it is the Victorian government's tariff comparator website. It's been around for at least 5 or 6 years, potentially a bit longer, and is quite good. And the other one we wanted to talk to you about, and we're actually going to take you through a practical online simulation, I guess, if you like, is called Whatever, which is a private commercial comparator site, but we think, particularly for Greenpower, but also we think for other reasons, it's a very good one too. And those are the web links to those comparison sites there on the slide. So Victorian Energy Compare. So as I say, this one's the Victorian government's one. So there's the web address at the top. This is a tariff comparator site where realistically pretty much all of the retailers and the retail offers in the Victorian market are in the back end of this website. So you can be very confident that you're getting to choose from all of the available offers that are out there. You can see that you can choose from, there's electricity offers or gas offers. So there's both electricity and gas retailers in there. And this website's gotten better too at predicting and providing information on the benefits of having solar too. So you can use their solar savings button there on the right-hand side to work out, if you don't have solar, whether or not it might be worth doing in your circumstance. Now, like most tariff comparison sites, they need to know a bit about you and about your home in order to present you the offers and the best offers for you. So you have to go through a bit of a survey process. To start with, on this one, you're answering questions around, are you a home or a small business? Do you have a recent bill? Have you been at the address for longer than 12 months? and they'll generally ask you who your current retailer is and what the postcode is, because not all retailers are in all areas, and then also the network businesses, the ones that own the poles and wires, which one of those you're in, that also influences the tariffs available to you. So you have to answer a few questions about your location, about your house to start with. And then they need to know basically what your energy use profile is. How much electricity, how much gas do you use over the course of a year, and what's its profile? How does it change on a daily basis and on a seasonal basis? Now you can answer a questionnaire. You can see the button there saying complete a questionnaire, and that'll take you through about a 5-minute survey where you need to answer questions on what appliances you've got, and you know, how many times you run the washing machine during the week, and all these sorts of things, whether or not you have solar already. And then they will factor that in terms of the tariffs that they present you. The other two options you can see in the buttons there in the middle and on the left, because in Victoria we have smart meters, everybody has a smart meter, at least the households do. You can actually go and get your data, or the website can go and get your data from your smart meter automatically. If you essentially give the NIMI, the NMI number, which Dean talked about in the bills information a little bit earlier. Now that's the most accurate way to do it, because then the tariffs that get presented, they'll be based specifically on your detailed usage profile. And I got to say, that is one function of this website that we really do like. Now, once you do that, you've either done the survey or maybe you've uploaded your smart meter data, and then the website can then present you all of these offers. And there'll be hundreds and perhaps thousands of offers. They will obviously present them to you in the order of generally the cheapest to the most expensive. And you can see in that slide there, it's on an annual basis. You can filter them in different ways, but that's generally how it will come up to begin with. And you'll see the retailer at the top there. You can see Origin Energy. It's the retail offer's got an ID. Sometimes the name, it'll have a specific name, which will be saying there. And you know, the tariff comparator website saying, well, this offer we estimate will cost you about $1,190 a year. On the left-hand side, you have all of these kind of filter buttons that you can use. You can look at it only by retail offers that include discounts or don't include discounts, or require a direct debit to be set up, or it has some other sort of incentives. So that's all good. You can look at all of them, or you can filter them if you're looking for certain things. You can look at them at the top left there by the type of tariff that it is, if it's just a flat rate like Dean had in his slides at the start, or if it's a time of use offer. Now, the one thing that it does present information on, but it's not the best way of accessing the information, is the info around Greenpower. So you can see I've ticked here on the left-hand side that we only want to show green offers. So these tariffs all involve some type of green power. And you can see the little green plant logo here in the middle. That means it's a green power offer. The problem is that when you, and this is a slider, we're not in a live simulation at the moment, but if you're in there, you would see that this might be 10% green power, or it might be 25% green power, or it might be 100% green power. You've kind of got to click into the individual offer itself and read through the details of each offer to see, well, how much green power are they offering you, and what is the price of that green power? So, you know, whilst it'll tell you whether green power's accessible as part of the offer, it's not as easy as the other comparator website we're going to show you in a minute about comparing green power offers. I'm just going to have a drink of water for a minute. Okay. And so, yeah, that's really the point there. You can get the details on green power, but it's not as easy to do that as the website that we're going to show you now. So I'm going to click across to the web now, to the internet, and we're going to actually look at the whatever website. Now I just need to increase my screen size so you can see that properly. And I might just check with my colleagues that that's coming through okay.
Yes, it is, Damien, sorry.
Great, thanks. Okay, so this is the other tariff comparator site. It's called Whatever. And yeah, as we said, it's a commercial site. So this is provided by sort of a private company, if you like. There's a few good things in it though. One thing to note to start with is they talk about, they actually have got 52 different retailers on this tariff comparator site. Now this is a national site. It's not just Victorian. Anybody across the country can use this site. And if they've got 50 odd retailers on there, then you know they're going to have a lot of tariff offers in there, and you're probably choosing from most of the ones. Now, the website does a few different things. This compare every retailer button on the left, that's the main thing we want to use. That's the comparison site. It also offers you some information on solar plans. It provides free energy guides, and it's got some disclaimers there around independence and impartiality. And that is something to read and be aware of with tariff comparator sites, because some of them do commission deals with some retailers and maybe not others. And you want to be sure that you're kind of getting, you're not sort of getting led only to a few different exclusive offers. Anyway, let's go into the main tariff comparison part of the website. Now, let's just take a minute to load. Okay, now it's a fairly short survey that whatever actually does. It's a bit shorter than the Victorian Energy Compare one, which is good. It doesn't take you as long to kind of get to the end point. But of course, same with Victorian Energy Compare, you've got to put in some information about where you are, what type of house you are, in order for them to be able to provide you information about the tariffs. So what we're going to do is actually do this survey, and I'm going to actually use my personal circumstance at home, my most recent electricity bill, which is largely a winter electricity bill. We do have solar here, so we're going to put that in, and then we're going to have a look at some tariff offers that are available to me. So generally with all of these comparison sites, the first thing they want to know where are you, because they need to know in the network, which electricity network are you in, and they then also want to know which retail tariffs are available to you. So if we just click on that for a second. Oh, that's being a little bit weird. Might just refresh that for the moment. Okay. So I live, well, now that's refreshed later. We just have to wait for a second. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so you need to put in your postcode, which for me is, I'm in Brunswick, so it's inner Melbourne, and you can see straight away that it's giving me two options. And those two options are the two distribution businesses, the network businesses that exist in my area. And so this might happen in your area, and you're only going to be in one. You don't have multiple network businesses like you can do with retailers. You're in one network. So how do you know which network you're in? You actually can go back to your bill. It will say it on your bill. So for me, the choices are City Power and Gemina. I know if I go back to my bill, it will say my electricity bill that I'm in the City Power network, and so I'll include or select that network. What type of electricity consumer am I? I'm a home, residential. Do I have electricity bill available? Yes, I do, which I've got here, which we'll look at in a moment. And what is my current retailer? My current retailer is a business called Diamond Energy. So I'm going to put that in because they'll compare the offers back to that offer. What electricity tariff are you on? There's a few different choices here. This kind of goes back to the slides that Dean was talking about before. Essentially for me, I'm just on an anytime tariff. So it doesn't change. It's just a flat single rate tariff that I get charged any time of the day or night or weekday or weekend. You might be different than that. You might have a time of use. It might have a peak and an off peak, or a peak and a shoulder and off peak, or you might have what's called a demand tariff, which is another form of tariffs coming into the market. Very uncommon at the moment, but you might hear more about those in the future. But for me, I'm just anytime. Do I have a controlled load dedicated circuit? No, I don't. Generally what that means is, historically, we used to have lots of homes with electric off-peak hot water systems and off-peak slab heating systems, and they had a physically separate circuit, and they were charged less for electricity for those appliances. But no, I don't have one of those. Do I have solar? Yes, I do. At this house, we have 5 kilowatts of solar. So they will factor that in. And then it's asking me straight away, do I get a premium or bonus solar feed-in tariff? And these go back to the old higher feed-in tariffs that used to be around sort of in 2009, 10, 11, 12, around then. We put in our solar after that, so no, I don't. But if you do, you would want to tick yes, because that will then impact the tariff calculations. Do I have a battery? No, I don't. If you do, you could put that there. And do I own an electric vehicle? No, no, I don't. I'd like to, but I don't. So we click through to the next screen. There's only one more. So that's the first page of the survey. There's only one more page, and that's it. Now I might just click back to my bills at the moment. I hope my bill, I hope this will come through. Is that coming through okay?
Yes, it is.
Great. So this is actually the back page of my winter electricity bill. And this has got a lot of the information that Dean was talking about in his presentation at the start. So first of all, the tariff comparison site's asking me, well, how many days am I looking to input from the bill? And this bill was a 92-day bill. It will also ask me how much electricity did I use during that period, which for me is the total of both of these numbers. It's about 1,850 what's called kilowatt hours. It's about 341 kilowatt hours of solar feed-in, which occurred during that period as well. So these are the numbers that I need to know to be able to put back into the tariff comparison site. So if we go back to the website, so it was 92 days. The peak usage, well, peak usage for me is just, that's any time, that's my entire usage. It was about 1,850 kilowatt hours. And how much went solar did I export in kilowatt hours? It was about 341 in that period. And the last question is, do I receive electricity concessional rebates? So for low income households, there are concessions available if you meet certain criteria, and that offers you a rebate or a reduction on your electricity bills, but I don't have that, so I leave it at 0 and then click through to the next screen, which is the last step. There's only 3 steps in this website. This one, you can, it's just asking you, how do you want your results? I can get them emailed to me. We can save this and come back to it later using different electricity profiles. But no, I just want the results presented to me on screen at the moment. Even if you press no, you do actually need to still put in your email address. That's what the whatever people require, and also your first and last name. So we put that in. There's some terms of use of the website, which you can read through, and need to click those if you want to actually see the plans. So I'll click that, and the last page now will be the offers coming up. When my computer finally gets there. Okay, so this is the screen that presents you all of the offers that are available to you. Again, it's presenting it to you from the cheapest offer they could find, and then going up from there. It's a kind of similar format to the Victorian Energy Compare one. So you've got all the deals there kind of listed, and you've got some filters and some click buttons and so forth on the left-hand side. Now, what I want to do, well, actually one thing we do need to do to start with. So this session is about Greenpower and how to understand Greenpower. So if we just scroll down to the bottom of the left-hand side here, you've got this ability to add 100% Greenpower. So what that means is they're only going to show you either 100% Greenpower offers, or they're going to build in that 100% Greenpower cost into the annual estimate of the bill. So I'm going to tick or click yes there, and that will actually change those annual amounts, because Greenpower, it does have a cost associated with it. It does cost a little bit more, and it depends on how much your usage is and what percentage you chose as to how much more that will be on an annual basis. Just underneath that too, they have this little section called Retailer Green Rating. Now there's an organisation up in New South Wales called the Total Environment Centre that every few years does an assessment of the greenness, if you like, or the sustainability of retailers in the energy market. And they last did one of their reports, I think in around 2018 from memory. And so this website has used that, and that report ranks retailers obviously from 0 to 5 stars. And so you can click on, you can look at only the green rating of retailers within a certain range there. You can look at only the 5-star ones, or you can look at 3 to 5-star ones, or you can look at the worst ones if you want. But the main thing for us here tonight really is adding in the 100% green power option. And then we're looking at prices now involving 100% green power. Now, another thing I like to do just at the top here on the left is at the moment, because you're able to compare all of these to your current plan. And so if you put in your electricity retailer at the start, which for me was Diamond Energy, I can see there, that's the name of my plan that I'm on at the moment. So if I click that, that should present, there we go. It presents roughly on an annual basis what my electricity bill would be now, $2,325. Now, that's not totally accurate, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment, but at least then you've got your current plan there at the top, and then you can look at the other plans and you can see, well, you know, how do they compare? What am I better or worse off compared to that? Another really important part of this is this comparison period here. This is something definitely to watch out for in terms of this website, and I'll explain that. So what happened was I put in some information based on my recent electricity bill, but that was only for the last 3 months. That bill that I showed you was my winter bill. So it was June, July, and August. And where I live, we're basically an all electric home. And so we run reverse cycle air conditioning for heating, and we have a heat pump hot water system for hot water. And the way that works out is generally we use, you know, significantly more electricity in winter than we do for the rest of the year. And bearing in mind, we've got a solar system as well. So our bills are very, very, very low for 9 months of the year, but they're quite high for 3 months of the year. Now I've inputted that information saying that I used, I think it was about 1,850 kilowatt hours. And you can see here the comparison period, it's currently set on 1 year. So what that's saying is, that's how much electricity you consume year round. And the reality is that, as I just explained, I don't. So the more accurate one for me at the moment is to select usage period. So now it will just come up with a cost estimate, not for a whole year, but just for me, for winter. And that's still a little bit high, but now it is much closer to what my winter bill actually was. So suddenly we can see already now my winter bill, it's saying here with Diamond is about $580. I know it was actually a bit less than that, but that's not too far off. And then it's saying a number of these other offers are only $507 or $529 for that period. So whilst it's got the total amount of the bill a little bit wrong, it actually, the relative difference is really the important thing. And the reality is that for me, a number of these offers will actually be cheaper than the deal I'm currently on. So perhaps I should change tonight. Now, that's probably the main things to talk about. Obviously, with each individual offer, you can go into the information area and you can really get into the detail of the offer. And the details of electricity retail offers are fairly lengthy, so they have all sorts of kind of terms and conditions and different sort of structures to them, and it's worth kind of getting your head around those things. Again, a bit like the Victorian Energy Compare, you can filter some of those things on the left-hand side. You can filter by the type of discounts or direct debit requirements, the benefit periods. They might give you a 12-month lower rate and then it comes up from them, whether or not the rate's fixed or it varies on a regular basis. And even down here, you can actually add more solar panels. So I've already got those solar panels at our place put in there. If I didn't have and I wanted to test new solar panels, you could test putting on a new solar system here or even upgrading your existing size of your system. So yeah, I think that's the main things we wanted to cover in terms of this. The reality with all of these tariff comparator sites is if you go to one of these sites and you see one of these offers, you decide, yep, that one at the top looks good. It's definitely, maybe it's $100, $200, $300 better off over the course of a year. I'm going to change. You can certainly do that from this website. If you choose that option, it'll take you to the electricity retailer's website to basically accept that deal and make the change. Changing retailers these days is very, very simple. It basically, you can do it online in a matter of minutes, really. And it doesn't involve, it's not as though if you change retailers, it doesn't take them a few days and your power goes off for 2 days or anything. You won't notice any difference to your electricity supply. And once you decide to take up one of those offers, obviously you're signing an agreement to do that. And then within a matter of, generally a couple of days, that offer you'll be switched over. So it's fairly straightforward. There's still a lot to kind of read through with any individual offers, particularly around some of the discounts and terms and conditions. But as we sort of said at the start, this whatever site is a really great way of comparing Greenpower offers and getting a good sense of how much a full Greenpower 100% offer is going to cost you on an annual basis or maybe on a seasonal basis. So I think I've probably talked quite a lot. I'll probably leave it there for the moment and maybe hand back to Mel and see if we've got any questions.
Thanks, Damien. Yes, we do have questions coming through the Q&A and the chat. Jacqueline asks, if I have solar, is there any extra benefit in buying Greenpower?
Yeah, there is. So I guess it sort of depends. When you have solar, what happens is some of that solar is used on site and some of it goes out to the grid, and you end up still using electricity from the grid because the solar it doesn't exactly match the profile that in terms of when you use electricity. And so you sort of get this mismatch a bit. Overall people will often put solar systems on to kind of generate enough energy on an annual basis to at least meet or be larger than the electricity they pull from the grid. And they are happy with that. And that's a great sort of environmental outcome. I guess an even better one is if you were still buying Greenpower for the imports from the grid of electricity that you were still buying. So that's, I guess that the even greener way to go. Plus with Greenpower, the great thing is that you are actually supporting additional investment into renewable energy. If we're all doing it, if we're all buying 100% Greenpower, it's a great way to support the industry and make sure there's more renewable energy rolling out.
Great, thanks, Damien. Maria asks, are there any financial penalties to switching retailers?
Not usually. It used to be the case that a lot of electricity offers were on fixed term contracts and there were fees for breaking the contract, but there's very few, if any of those left anymore. Most electricity contracts, there's no penalty for leaving. They're mostly not fixed terms. So worth checking with your current electricity retailer, but it's very unlikely nowadays that there'd be any financial penalty.
Great, thanks, Dean. And you can always get 100% Greenpower through your current retailer if you don't want to switch. But yes, that's good to note that there usually are not penalties for switching. And as Damien mentioned earlier, it's quite easy to switch these days. Maria asks, how do we know if we have a smart meter or not? Yeah,
99.9%. If you live in a home in Victoria, you have one. About 10 years ago, there was a big rollout that was done. A few houses for various reasons kind of didn't get one or didn't want one, or there's a few network issues, technical issues why it didn't happen, but largely, more likely than not, you've got one. If you don't have one, generally it's a matter of asking your electricity retailer to have one.
And the best way to check this to be sure is that generally a smart meter will have like a digital readout and a red flashing light on it. And generally a non-smart meter won't have that. It'll look older and it'll probably have a spinning disc. There are a few digital looking meters that aren't smart meters, but yeah, they're pretty uncommon. The other thing to keep in mind though, is that if you live in an apartment block, some apartments might not have smart meters. Some apartments, you don't actually have a direct relationship with a regular retailer. You're in what's called an embedded network where you don't really have a choice of who your electricity retailer is. In those cases, you might have limited options or no options at all to get Greenpower or to change retailers. but that is changing in the future probably. But yeah, worth checking if you're in an apartment.
Thank you. Julie asks, why do some retailers charge more for a Greenpower premium than others? Is it basically the same thing?
It's definitely the same thing. I mean, when we say the same thing, what it is it's renewable energy that might have come from this wind farm or that wind farm or this solar farm, but it is definitely, I mean, a Greenpower certificate is 1 unit of renewable energy from those accredited generators. Yes, the cost can vary because it's basically, it's a market. So those retailers are in there buying different volumes of green power and renewable energy at different times. They're actually forced to buy a certain amount of renewable energy outside the green power scheme and have been forced for 20 years to do that. And so depending on how much they buy forward, if they buy 5 years worth, or, you know, the reality is when you buy it just for your house, they don't just go and buy your bit today, that they buy big volumes of it. And depending on how much they buy, that'll affect the price that they get, and then that affect the price that they sell to you. And then they might also package it up with other discounts and things where they're happy to, you know, sell it for cheaper to try and get you onto some other deal. So yeah, it does vary a bit.
I mean, it's sort of similar to energy prices. Generally, the prices vary all the time in the energy market. And like many other products, the energy retailers, different retailers have different margins. Some expose themselves to more risk of price volatility for themselves, and some expose themselves to less. That explains a lot of the price difference in the energy market, because really, at any given point in time, electricity costs one price in the whole of Victoria.
Great, thanks. That was a really good explanation. Tom asks, my electricity company says it's carbon neutral. Is that the same as Greenpower? That's
a great question. The answer is a maybe. The answer generally is you need to ask a few more questions. It's not, so Greenpower is Greenpower and it's not anything else. Greenpower is a specific scheme, a specific brand and a specific policy, if you like. So either something is Greenpower or it isn't. And if it's claiming to be Greenpower and it isn't actually a certificate that's kind of bought through that scheme, then it's not Greenpower. But that's not to say that the unit of energy that they're trading is not renewable energy. You do get some retailers which have a much higher proportion of renewable energy in the mix that they buy. You have some companies which, you know, they're really just predominantly focused on wind farms. And so whilst their basic energy offer is not necessarily green power, they may be able to demonstrate to you, but you'd really need to ask the question, can you actually prove to me that this is definitely renewable energy and you're not buying anything from coal or gas or anything else?
Yeah, so sort of one of the differences is that the Greenpower scheme has a concept called additionality, where it has to be extra renewable energy that wouldn't otherwise have been generated, because the aim of it is to actually encourage more green energy. Whereas if someone's carbon neutral, they might be using, like a wind farm they already own, or just as part of their general buying. So that's sort of the difference.
Great. There's a related question. Is some green power better than others? For example, is it better to find a company who buys from new wind or solar farms rather than hydro that is already well established, so it's not really supporting new investment in renewables?
Look, in theory, we would say yes. The reality is, though, still that so the green power scheme in general, the amount of people and the amount of volume that's bought through it it's not as though new big renewable energy plants are starting up every week because of the volumes bought through green power. The main thing is, like Dean was saying before, it's additional above what the retailers have to buy already. So it's certainly additional renewable energy. It means more than the national targets, but it doesn't necessarily mean that just because a group of people buy it this week, that another wind farm will then suddenly get constructed next week. Like we need, in reality, we need more and more people buying through the scheme.
Great, thanks. There's a question here from Wendy that's about offsets. So I think she's just wanting to get some more information about offsets. Yeah, well, offsets. So offsets is a different type of
I mean, Greenpower and offsets are similar, but Greenpower is purely renewable electricity generation, and it's from specific accredited generators. Offsets in a way have been around longer, maybe, or Greenpower's been around a long time, but offsets is not necessarily or not only about electricity generation. It's about reducing tons of emissions. So that might come from, like, the project that's creating an offset. It might come from a renewable electricity generation project somewhere in the world. It might be Australia, or it might be elsewhere. But there are lots of other types of projects that can create offsets. Energy efficiency, more sustainable land practices. A lot of these things can create offsets, carbon farming, soil carbon, these kind of things. And often carbon offsets, particularly, or depending on where they come from and which scheme they're in and how they're accredited, they can actually be cheaper than Greenpower. They can be cheaper than renewable electricity generation as a project, particularly when you convert it back to the actual amount of tonnes that are reduced. So they are different. I mean, probably one of our main messages with offsets is we're still, we like the Greenpower scheme because it's independently audited, it's verified, it's an accredited scheme. There are some offset schemes that we like on that basis as well. There's a standard in Australia called the National Carbon Offset Standard. There's a few global schemes. One's called the Verified Carbon Standard. Another one's called the Gold Standard. We like these schemes because they're independently audited. They have monitoring and verification, and you have a lot of confidence that these projects led to additional emissions abatement, again, like what we were saying before. There are other carbon offset schemes or carbon offset projects where it's a bit questionable as to whether additionality is being achieved and as to exactly whether the tonnes of, that are reduced are really being realised.
Great, thanks, Damien. I think that's a really important point that you've made a couple of times in answering these different questions, that Greenpower is about additionality, and it's something, when you're buying Greenpower, you're contributing to additional renewable energy in the mix. So it's not, if it's something that was already existing, that's not really what Greenpower is. Greenpower is about creating additional impact. I think we've got a couple of more questions here. There's a question: if I have solar, should I be on a tariff which has a higher daytime rate and a lower nighttime rate?
It really depends on your overall usage as well, but generally speaking, if you do have solar and you use a fair bit of it during the day, then it probably is less important how high your daytime rate is and more important how high your nighttime rate is. But it does depend also on the times and on your particular usage patterns. So this is actually where the Victoria Energy Compare website can be really helpful, because you can upload you can connect it with your actual energy data, so it can actually take account of your unique usage. Anything to add, Damien?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, that's, you kind of look at it and you go, yeah, that would sort of work. But the reality is that, so most households use most of their energy, or a lot of electricity in the early to mid evenings, and that's, it's actually hard to find sort of off-peak or lower tariffs that start sort of before 10 or 11 p.m. at night. So if you could find one where the off-peak lower tariff started at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, then that would be great. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's sort of, yeah, it is, that's where the smart meter data is very handy. But even if you don't have that, it's really where tariff comparison websites help a lot, because in order to do that annual bill calculation, taking into account your profile and solar and different tariff shapes and structures, it's just not something that you can do in your head. You have to really have some sort of engine like a tariff comparator to do the maths and then estimate what the annual bill is going to be.
Well, one thing to keep in mind, if you do have solar and you have very low usage from the grid because of it, then it's probably good to look at what your daily rate is on the bill, because basically, if you use not much electricity, then actually the cost of the electricity matters less than the daily rate. So I would really recommend anyone who has low usage, either by being a small usage household or by having solar, should be probably favouring ones that have a lower daily rate, even if the energy rate is a bit higher. But again, the energy comparison website should actually, they'll factor that in when you do the calculation.
Great, thanks. Oh, we have another question. I'm with PowerShop and I don't get a bill as such. Should I be able to find the relevant information like the NIMI and peak usage from their website?
Yeah, you should be able to get it. PowerShop emails you a monthly account statement that actually has a PDF attached to it. That's sort of like a bill, and it looks very different to the bill that I showed before, but it should have that information on it. It'll have your NIMI on it and all that stuff. The app also, if you use the PowerShop app on your phone, it's also got a lot of that information. If you go into the menu and you look down the side, it's got all your account information, it's got the tariffs that you're on, and it's got a whole lot of information. So you should be able to find it there. And if you have trouble finding it, maybe give their helpline a call and ask them where to find it.
Thanks, Dean. I think with most of those companies, you can also download a PDF bill if you use the website or app if you need to have a PDF bill. There's another question. How often do you recommend comparing offers?
That's a really good question. I mean, I'm not sure we have a recommendation on that. We probably, I mean, retail offers change a lot. The retailers are able to change offers fairly regularly. So it's probably something that, you know, people should do once a year. And I don't do that, and I probably should. But I mean, I suppose, you know, once you've done it once or twice and you've found that kind of, you're at the bottom end of the range and you're getting a really good deal, then, you know, keeping on, I mean, reviewing it every now and again is a good idea. But if, you know, electricity prices don't sort of drop by that much that quickly, that if you were at the bottom end of the range, you know, 6 months ago, you wouldn't suddenly be at the top end of the range 6 or 12 months later. But yeah, maybe, I don't know, Dean, if you have a view.
I reckon the thing to watch for really is if you use a comparison site or you see offers and you go for like one of the absolute cheapest energy retailers, they're the sort of tariffs that are more likely to change and get higher over time. Because one of the strategies energy retailers use is they offer really cheap deals so people sign up and then they raise the price. So that's what I'll be watching out for. If you use a comparison site and you find one that's sort of in the lower sort of section of the bill outcomes, and it's also a company that you trust or that you like, and then you feel like you get good service from them, and maybe they've got a good rating on like the green energy retailer chart, well, you know, some of those things might be worth more than the absolute lowest price, especially if they sort of hover around that relatively low one. Like I'm with PowerShop. And they're not the cheapest. They've got a good green energy rating. They're not the most expensive either. They're probably below average cost wise, but it varies a bit. And for me, it's like, well, you know, I'm more comfortable with that, and my price stays pretty steady, and I'm not bouncing around between low and going high. So it really depends on how much you really want to save as much as you can, and how much you're prepared to do that extra work.
Great, thanks. So noticing that the default setting on the whatever comparison page for solar, when you go to the, I think it's along the left-hand side when you say add new solar, the default setting is 40% for how much solar will you use at your house. So that's what this is referring to. And the question is 40% the standard amount of solar most people with solar will use at home? This is the default setting on the whatever site. Yeah,
that's a really good question, and I probably should have touched on that in the presentation. That is not, for a lot of people, that may be not anywhere near the kind of default setting. So it depends obviously on your appliances and when you run them. If you're a typical Melbourne home and you run heating and hot water on gas and maybe cooking on gas, your electricity usage may be very low, and it may be very low during the day between like 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Now, if that's your kind of house and you go and put even a small to medium sized system, 3, 4, 5 kilowatt system on the roof, you'll end up exporting, more like sort of 80%, maybe more of that electricity to the grid. Now, it works out okay because you get a feed-in tariff for the export, but you won't, in that scenario, you won't use 40% of it on site. If you do start to run more appliances, you might convert some or convert some, say, gas to electric ones, run a few more big ones on electricity, or you move some of your existing electric appliances to the day. That's when you can get that that percentage up and get better value out of your solar. But yeah, that's probably not quite, we'd probably have that setting a little bit lower in terms of our default setting if someone's considering, solar for the first time.
Great, thanks. And a question, any idea how much or what proportion of energy usage nationally has the Greenpower scheme converted into renewable energy?
Yeah, so Greenpower's part of the larger federal renewable energy target policy, which we've had in the country for 20 years, started in 2001. So Greenpower's sort of the add-on to that policy. How much Greenpower's contributed is a much smaller proportion. What that policy's done overall over 20 years is basically start off with hardly any renewable energy at all, apart from the dams down in Tassie. And last year, renewable energy in our normal electricity generation across the whole country, renewable energy supplied about 24% of the total electricity generated across the country. Now that's driven by the whole renewable energy target policy. Greenpower is only a very small proportion of that. It's probably only sort of 1 or 2% of that.
Great, thanks. I think we've gotten through all the questions, and we are just about up to the end of our time. So Damien and Dean, do you have anything else that you'd like to wrap up your presentation with?
Not for me.
No, not for me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Well, if you could just put that last slide on, I'll just tell everyone about the links that we talked about at the beginning of the session.
Hopefully, I just need to.
Thanks, Damien. Perfect.
Sorry, just resize this.
Great, thanks. So I want to say thanks to everyone for coming tonight. And we hope you learned a lot about Greenpower, why it's important, what it's about, and most importantly, how to compare offers and find the right one for you. And a big thank you to our presenters, Damien Moyes and Dean Lombard from Renew. So at the beginning, I told you that we would share some links with you at the end of the session. So here they are, but I realize it's very difficult to write down links from a webinar. So at the end of this session, you'll also have an email in your inbox, which includes all of this information, as well as a quick survey. So we'd love to have your feedback on this session. I'll just quickly talk through the links that you see on the page here. 100% Renewable Yarra is the City of Yarra's new set of web pages around going 100% renewable and taking those 4 actions that I talked about at the beginning. You can visit the Renew website to find out more about the great work that they do, and lots of information about energy efficiency, saving energy, and renewable energy on their website. We are having a solar information session, which will be another webinar next Thursday at the same time. And this link to register for that will also be included in the email that you receive at the end of this session if you're keen to find out more about solar. We also have a program called the Yarra Solar Program, which offers discounted prices on quality solar systems. And you can find out more about that next week, or you can visit that link to find out more about that program. And the other thing I talked about at the beginning was finding out more by watching our recordings of previous webinars. We've had quite a few webinars this year as part of our climate action series. There's one called Buy Renewable Energy and Save Energy at Home, which is also with Damien, who's been presenting with us tonight. And it has a little bit of information about Greenpower, similar to what you've seen tonight, but a lot of information also about saving energy in your home and what you can do around the home. So you can click on that link to view that webinar and other webinars that we have recordings of. So thank you so much for coming. Have a great evening. And we hope to see you at another of our climate action webinars or events very soon.